Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker. I'd like to thank Neil Schaefer for being here with us today. Neil is a recognized leader in helping businesses maximize your social, which is also the title of one of his books. In addition to being an author, Neil is also a global keynote speaker, university educator, social media agency owner, and social media strategy consultant. From Fortune 50 enterprises to Grammy Award-winning musicians, Neil has helped leading brands reach their next level in social media marketing. I'm sure it is evident why Neil has long served as an executive education faculty member for our mini MBA social media marketing and more recently in our social selling program. Welcome to today's webinar, Neil Schaefer, and please take it from here.
Thank you very much, and a good morning, good afternoon to everybody that is attending this webinar. Well, thank you, Margaret, for that kind introduction. We're just going to jump right into the content, and before we do, we always want to understand who is currently being represented on this webinar, and I think it's also good education for the other attendees as well to understand virtually who your peers are. So we just have two very, very quick poll questions that we're going to ask right now at the very beginning. And we're also going to be sharing these results so that everybody can see them as well. So this is just a general question to understand how big your sales team is. Obviously, social selling is about equipping your sales team with the tools they need vis-a-vis social and digital media to be successful. So how big is your sales team? And once we get a overwhelming majority of those that vote, we'll close the poll and share the results with everybody. Alrighty, we'll just wait 5 or 10 more seconds. I know some of you haven't voted. If you could click on the most appropriate one so that we have a more accurate figure. All right, thank you very much, everybody. So we'll close the poll, and these are the results. So a lot of you that are attending are more on the smaller sales force side. Obviously, having 25 salespeople is not necessarily a small business per se, but you know, the whole idea about social selling is whether it's one person or whether it's 500 salespeople, what you do, what you implement can scale across that organization. And perhaps those that have the fewer number of salespeople, the 1 to 25, might see more immediate results. Might be a little bit easier to get your entire team together. Those obviously that have larger sales forces, I'm assuming those are virtually dispersed perhaps around the country or around the world, so it's going to take a more concerted effort. And nevertheless, the content I'm going to be providing today is going to be relevant regardless of your sales force size. So just one more question, and this really gets down to where you are on your journey vis-a-vis social selling. So, you know, perhaps you don't have any formal program in place, but it's something that you want to invest, you know, time and money in, and one of the reasons why you're attending this webinar. Maybe you don't have a formal program in place, but some of your salespeople, you know, are already using social media. They already have anecdotal success stories that they've shared with you or shared with their team. Perhaps you've already started the investment in training, and we're going to talk about why that's important next. And you're already starting to build the framework of a social selling strategy for your company is the third choice. The fourth choice is, hey, we're already doing social selling. We already have training. We already have enablement. You know, it's working, but we're looking for ideas to further improve our ROI. So if you could just take a, we'll just wait 5 or 10 more seconds for some more of you to vote so that we have an overwhelming majority of answers here. All righty, so we're going to close the poll and share the results. So when I speak and train, I find that this is very common, that most companies still do not have a formal program in place. And for those that don't, many of them will find, if they were to survey their salespeople, that yes, there's already some salespeople that are already using social, and they might have a success story or two to share with you. Great to also see, though, that 18% of you are already in social selling mode and are just looking for ways to improve your ROI. So this is probably a very average number. If I was to go to various conferences and ask sales managers or VPs of sales or sales directors, what is the current state of your social selling program? This is often pretty similar to the results that I would expect. So for all of you, regardless of where you are, I think you sort of see the roadmap here, the journey that as a company, hopefully you'll be taking on this path to social selling. So I thank you all for your cooperation in responding to those poll questions. Let's move on now to the content. So there's a lot of content that I've prepared. I really, with this very short time that we have together, want to do my best to give you a snapshot as to what is involved from a very, very macro perspective in terms of a successful social selling program. And I think it begins with an introduction to social media as part of the sales process. So, with marketing, it's the same. With sales, it's the same. You need to be where your customers are. And more, if we take a step back and look at it from a marketing perspective, we are all going digital. In fact, although there's still many companies that spend a lot of money on TV advertising, in December of 2017, it was the first month in which digital ad spend beat out TV ad spend. And as you see with the projections for the next 5 years is it's going to be worth, the digital ad market's going to be worth twice as much as your traditional TV ad market. So marketing is already shifting digital. Sales obviously has not quite been there, but it's really the same concept that digital marketers understand that's where the customers are, and your customers similarly are also in digital and social media. And one way to look at this is, back in the day, and I have a B2B sales background myself that I'll be sharing later on, when sales needed leads, marketing had these different things, different ways in which they could spend money and get leads, or get sales, TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, billboards, print media, trade shows. Some of these are still relevant and still important, but back in the day, it was assumed that by doing all these things, we would be able to touch every potential person, every potential buyer out there. Obviously, today, the media landscape has shifted significantly because today, everyone is a publisher. The number one thing we do when we're online is social media. And whenever we are publishing content, we have the ability and the potential to influence others that view that content. And the really, really interesting thing that's become very apparent over the last year or two is that the algorithms that determine what content shows up in news feeds in social media definitely favors people. As social networks go more and more pay to play, then it gives people the ability to influence more and more people for free. So that's another sort of exciting aspect or trend that sort of feeds into the value of social selling. And I mentioned that today we are digital first, marketing is digital first. And if you think about it, I'm a Gen Xer, I'll be very transparent about my age, and I'm blessed because I remember life before the internet, and I can compare what it was like before that. If we had a health-related issue, we went to a doctor. Well, a majority of people now will first go online to do research before even calling a doctor. And maybe they'll resolve their issue just through their research or sending questions in social media or maybe visiting a group on Facebook before they even talk to a doctor. And the same thing goes with home buying. Back in the day, if you wanted to buy a home or rent an apartment, you went to a realtor. Well, everybody now is obviously starting their searches online, and they may, in fact, perform a real estate transaction without ever personally engaging with a realtor. So this is the reality. And because everybody is digital first and spending so much time in digital and social, this is the opportunity, I believe, for those organizations that can equip their salespeople with the ability to be where their audience is, and that is in social media. So the way that customers communicate with you now is fundamentally different, right? When I was selling semiconductors to consumer electronic manufacturers in Asia back in the day, if those companies wanted to find out information about us, they had to call us. We had to have a salesperson or ideally an engineer actually visit their factory and present to them the information. These days, people are doing the research themselves. And in fact, you may never get contacted because they've already decided to work with a different company without giving you the opportunity. There is so much information out there that now the buyer is in control of a market where it used to be the seller in control of that information and content. So this is a number that perhaps some of you have heard before. If you've ever been to a seminar or a webinar or a speech on social selling, this 57% number that was found several years ago, that purchasing decisions now are made via research before you are even being contacted. So if the phones aren't ringing like they used to, well, there's probably a reason why. And this is really the biggest reason why. So that's sort of, the outline as to us being digital first and sales needing to be where their customers are. Let's go further into defining exactly what social selling is and what its ROI might look like. So social selling, and there's a few different definitions out there. We're talking today about social selling as sales organizations leveraging social media. So social media becomes another tool in a salesperson's toolbox to help build pipeline, foster relationships, and close more business faster. Social selling is not going to replace anything else that your sales force is doing. You're not going to unplug on the phone or email or any of that, but it is a complementary aspect, another tool. Because let's face it, not 100% of our prospects are on social media all the time. But if some of them are on social media some of the time, it can become a very, very powerful tool. And if we have prospects and some of them are on social media some of the time, we obviously have a way now to leverage social to help us build pipeline. And fostering relationships, this is what social media is all about, right? So by being active on there, there's going to be inherent value in strengthening relationships. So when we talk about social selling, there's a lot of different social networks out there. But from a professional perspective, from the perspective that we can search and find people within organizations, assuming that we have this traditional B2B paradigm of selling into organizations, we can map out organizations, see how we fit in terms of needing introductions or connections, find out a lot about people, and really build pipeline directly inside LinkedIn, especially if we use their paid product Sales Navigator, which I will talk a little bit about later as well. So I like to call LinkedIn the ultimate virtual Rolodex to build business relationships. Not everybody in this Rolodex you're connected to, but the idea is that it is a virtual Rolodex. It is there for the taking, and the potential is there for you to leverage it to build these relationships. LinkedIn is not as sexy as Facebook or Instagram. It only has half or even a quarter of the users of Facebook potentially, but the people that are on LinkedIn are very targeted. It is an extremely corporate professional demographic. You don't have a lot of high school students on LinkedIn. You don't have junior high school students acting like they're high school students on LinkedIn. So a lot of the noise that's associated with some of those other more popular platforms you don't have on LinkedIn, it becomes very targeted. And LinkedIn at this point is a very, very international platform. In fact, in some countries, you'll find that LinkedIn might even be more popular on average than even here in the United States. So Margaret, I always like to take breaks at the 15-minute marks just to catch my breath, but also see if there's any burning questions so far. Do we have anything, or should I keep going?
So I think you should keep going, but this is a great time to remind everyone to use the questions box. A few minutes ago, I sent a message via chat to remind people that as they think of questions, some of them will be able to address, as you described, in a burning question kind of way, and the rest we'll take a look at during our Q&A session.
Great, okay. So moving right along, what are the different opportunities for social selling once our sales organization can become more active in social media? And because we are digital first, obviously there's a lot of different opportunities. The opportunity to maintain mind share with current clients and deepen relationships with them. What this means is that if your current clients are on social media and they are checking into social media, they are seeing news feeds and they might be influenced by other people. Those other people might be representing your competitors or competitive products. And therefore, just by being active and engaging with their content, right, on a regular basis, our names are going to show up in the notifications button that so-and-so liked, so-and-so commented. And this is a very, very easy way to maintain mind share. I usually joke with people there was a rogue app in Japan. It was a Facebook app. I don't think it was a legal app, but it was called Like Your Boss. And the idea was that you told the app who your boss was, you friend them on Facebook, and whenever they posted something, within a few minutes, it would automatically like that post. And it's really funny, obviously, but it's brilliant in some ways because that person is always showing up in the notification bubble of that boss, and they're going to be remembered, right? It's all about mind share. It's all about when someone makes an important decision, who are they going to remember? And you want to make sure that your salespeople in your organization is obviously being remembered. We obviously have the ability to build new relationships with prospects. We can do searches. Who is talking about the various things in social media. We might be commenting on one of our clients' posts, and we see someone else commenting, and by the look of the comment, they might become a potential customer as well. So we can not only find prospects, but if we find them and connect with them, we can build new relationships with them over social media. Similarly, we can discover business intelligence about people and organizations, not simply by the content that they post, but also simply by going through their company on LinkedIn, seeing who is in what place, what relationship do we have about them, what relationships do they have with each other, etc. We can listen to conversations that could lead to new business. This is, looking at conversations in, for instance, LinkedIn groups, or conversations that often take place within the comments of different posts. And most importantly, perhaps for some companies, is seeding the market with information about your company. Everybody is, when they check into a social network, they're going to the newsfeed. We have the ability to influence others in the newsfeed, not only with engaging with their content or liking their content or commenting, but also by publishing our own content that generates demand for our products and services. This becomes a very powerful tool for social selling that we're going to go into more detail on later on in this webinar. So LinkedIn has provided sales organizations a lot of data regarding how those have been successful using LinkedIn. And there's something called the Social Selling Index that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But they see that those that are, from a LinkedIn perspective, better at social selling, or organizations that have more salespeople that are proficient in social selling, earn more opportunities per quarter, are more likely to make quota per quarter. And I think that as we go through the webinar, it will make sense as to why. They are leveraging a channel where their customers are spending more and more time, and they're leveraging it in a very, very smart way, engaging, building relationships, finding business intelligence, but also providing content to their prospects and to their customers all along the buying journey. So there's a number of case studies out there. If you were to do a Google search, you'll find a tremendous amount. I just want to share a few in case you wanted to see, well, from a numbers figure, what might this look like? And these are very modest numbers. We have in contact revenue per sale increased by 122% in 6 months, perhaps by deepening relationships with prospects and buyers over social media. They were able to increase that revenue, adding extra products, extra services, what have you. Exo Communications, within the first week, boom, already found a new deal of recurring revenue. Macquarie Telecom, they use something that is part of the paid LinkedIn product called Sales Navigator, which allows you to map connections of your employees. So a first-degree connection of mine can become a first-degree connection of anybody in my organization. And just by mapping out the connections of employees, especially for those of you that have those very, very large sales forces, you may find that the key decision makers may already be first degree contacts with other people in your organization, making it very, very easy for you to get an introduction and to get in front of that decision maker. So these are just some examples that you can see. Obviously, the numbers are going to depend on the company, the industry, how long of a sales cycle your product or service has, but there definitely is ROI that you can attach to all these activities. And in fact, if you are using a CRM, which I am assuming you are, if your salespeople were tagging these various activities that they do over over social media with their prospects, you're going to see, as I like to say, social media replaces nothing yet complements everything. You're going to see different touch points that invariably your salespeople will start having as they move their prospects through the pipeline and to becoming customers. So the challenge, though, and this gets back to that second poll question as to where are you on your social selling journey. When sales reps are properly trained on social selling, they see the ROI because they see it's going to lead to greater sales and therefore in many cases greater commissions. They will do it. So social selling adoption increases tremendously for those that get trained on it. Unfortunately, and this number is from a little while ago, perhaps at 11%. If we look at the poll figure, that might be more like 18 or 25%, but still an overwhelming majority of companies are just not providing that training for a variety of reasons, but obviously over time, and with what I like to call the digital transformation of sales, more and more companies are playing catch up. The great thing about this for your company is you can be one of those, 11, 18, 25% of companies that are doing it and hopefully blow away your competition who are not doing it. So there's obviously some positivity out of that message. So for the remaining, 25, 30 minutes that we'll have together before the Q&A, I want to go through the different components that I see are necessary for a successful social selling program. I'm going to go through each of these one by one because I do believe that a robust social selling program needs a lot of different things. Now, the smaller the organization, the fewer things that you're probably going to be able to implement. But really, I think each one of these builds upon each other, going from light color to dark color, starting with the branding of your employees, which is implemented in their online profile development. Obviously, speaking about LinkedIn profiles, we then look at the various social selling tools, and I'm going to introduce the most powerful one that exists. Then we're going to talk about that content piece of actually seeding the market, seeding your network with information that can generate demand. And then what's going to help this content piece and help your salespeople actually be able to publish on a regular basis are what we call employee advocacy programs. We then will finish off with sales and marketing alignment, because once sales starts consuming more of marketing's content, it really does sort of redefine this relationship. And then finally, when companies are going full steam ahead on social selling, there's going to be a need to support that program, and many organizations are choosing a sales enablement person or department or division, whatever it might be, to help support that social selling program going forward. So let's start with the personal branding side, or from a corporate perspective, the branding of our employees. So once again, I like to tap into data wherever I can. This is data that LinkedIn has shared, that buyers will research vendors through LinkedIn profiles. They'll do searches, but often they are also doing people searches and looking at the profiles of various people in the company. These might be salespeople, these might be executives, they might be technical people, which is why really I want to talk about that employee advocacy perspective, because ideally, smart organizations are, when we talk about the personal branding, they're not limiting it just to salespeople for these various reasons. So 50% of buyers will also avoid sales professionals with incomplete profiles. Who is this person? Where did they come from? If they've been successful at sales for 20 years, why don't they have any recommendations? If they've been in this niche industry for 5 years, why don't we have any common mutual connections? There are many things that savvy buyers will navigate LinkedIn profiles and look for red flags and decide whether or not they want to respond to that pitch or that introduction request. And that's why really, if you think about it, whatever your salespeople do on LinkedIn, it's going to create a link which is going to drive people back to their profile. And that's where the personal branding becomes so important. And then after that, obviously, the LinkedIn profile development. So if you think about it, whenever your employee says that they work at your company or a salesperson, their LinkedIn profile becomes part of your brand's face on LinkedIn. People are going to start, making assumptions about your company or about your brand indirectly by looking at the profiles of the people that work there. So it's about investing the same amount of time you would if you were creating a new website into these micro websites that represent your company, those of your outward facing employees, most notably being the salespeople. So employees are being taught personal branding. In fact, let me take a step back here. A lot of companies are equipping employees and salespeople, especially with professional photos. Have a photo day, whether it be like at a Target or a Sears, or have a professional photographer come in, set up a real simple studio, get the pictures done so that everybody has a professional face on LinkedIn. So going forward, though, employees are in these programs are being taught personal branding, not just the fact that you want to have a photo because people resonate with photos and will engage with photos. And there's a lot of fake profiles on LinkedIn. And perhaps if you don't have your photo listed there, it sort of raises more questions. It's another red flag. But they're also looking at the branding, which is often manifested in this professional headline that we see here. So you want to make sure that if your company is all about selling world-class VR technology, then somehow in the profile of your employee selling world-class VR technology to savvy enterprises in the United States might be one potential professional branded headlines that if a buyer is doing a search and they see results like this, you want them to click on your salesperson. Or obviously, when your salesperson reaches out to a company and they look at their profile, the first thing they see at the top is the photo and the brand. You want to make sure that that's aligned, obviously with your company, but also with the brand of that person and their unique experiences and expertise that they bring to the market. So when we continue on, we have this professional branded headline that I mentioned. We also have the summary. We also have summaries in our experience. And these are areas in which often companies with social selling programs are saying, hey, we've already created a paragraph or two. You can simply cut and paste this and stick it in there, and it's going to make you look great. And we've already SEO optimized the content so that we know that when people do searches, we're going to show up for the right keywords. So the summary is something that even LinkedIn would recommend that you do in first person. Experience in terms of your company or just talking about your company can be done in third person. So the summary here, the first person, is going to be something that's going to fall really on the employees to talk about their own personal story and how they help customers. When we go to the experience with the company, though, this very well could be, or at least part of it could be, a template that corporations provide employees, and that's something you may want to consider doing if you haven't done so yet. So this professional brand from a salesperson perspective, it becomes a living online professional representation of who they are. Usually they will buy into any training, any any recommendations about personal branding, they will buy into it. They will want to invest in it, right? Because it becomes, who they are. It helps them grow their network with the right type of people. So if we take a step back here, if I am an author writing a book about autism and my target customer are people that have an interest in autism, then that's the perfect branding. But if we want to attract people that are interested in virtual reality technology, we want to have the right branding on our profile that showcases that that's what we do, and we're experts in it, and we help our customers with it, or what have you. It also, over time, allows you to build local thought leadership. This happens often not just from the profile, but from the regular publishing of content and engaging with others around that same content. And over time, you do begin to be seen as a person of authority in that niche in which you are branded in. From a salesperson's perspective, the number one goal they have obviously is to close more business, but indirectly, as they spend 5-10 minutes a day in social media, sharing content here and there, commenting here and there, over time they do begin to be seen as a person of authority. And we see this even more so in marketing with bloggers and content creators and influencers, those YouTubers that your kids are subscribing to. They begin to be seen as a person of authority, right? Because they have connected with the right people and they have been continuing to publish relevant content that's attracted a relevant following, and therefore begin to be seen as a person of authority. So it's considering a salesperson sort of a micro influencer or a nano influencer in the market representing your brand is really an ideal perspective to have, I think. And therefore, it's not just your profile, it's the content. When people do searches for content, you want to make sure that it's content that represents your salesperson's personal brand, but also your company. So, you are what you tweet, and you will attract others based on what you tweet. And regardless if it's Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, you want to make sure that you stick to your branding and the products and services that your salespeople are representing. Wow, Margaret, time flies. We're at the 30-minute mark, so I just want to take another sip of coffee here. Do we have any other questions, or should we wait to the end to take any that we have?
One question that came in two different forms, but I think it's very relevant to what you've been speaking about was, is there a conflict between having kind of like the personal LinkedIn account and then a company strategy? And then beyond a conflict, are there any legal considerations for that?
There are. We cannot force our employees to do any of this. We can only ask them, we can train them, we can show them that by doing this, it's going to help them become more successful at their job. It's going to be a core skill that they can carry on throughout their career. And I do believe that a lot of them will buy into it. But with like many things, social media and with digital media, we lose control, right? Some of your salespeople are going to implement it the way you teach them to. Some are never going to do anything with it. It's human nature. So none of this can be forced. And people have IP ownership of their own LinkedIn profile. If they want to share content about your company, there's nothing wrong with doing that. They're an employee of your company. It's only natural that they are doing that. So from that perspective, so long as this is not being forced upon them, there's obviously no legal concerns. That being said, I am not a lawyer. You always, as with anything social media related, which involves personal profiles, you always want to be reaching out to your legal team. But I think that that's going to be the key issue in terms of employment law. An interesting point about this is that this is another reason why a lot of companies are investing in LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which I'm going to talk about when I talk about tools here, because it allows for some corporate ownership of some activities that are going on LinkedIn. They're still personal profiles, but because the company has paid for access to certain things, it could be argued that those things become corporate IP and not personal IP. And I know one company that I work with that I train their employees on, they were a very, very small company. Well, not too small, but their sales force was, I don't know, 10, 15 people. And their salespeople were not really using LinkedIn that effectively, but the CEO realized this aspect and said, you know what, we're just going to go straight to Sales Navigator for that aspect in which we can control, or the company can amass more IP from LinkedIn. So once again, this is going to be a question to ask your legal team, but from my perspective, those are the key concerns that I have, and another reason why you might want to consider Sales Navigator. And I'm sure if you reach out to LinkedIn, they'll be able to give you further background on that.
Okay, good. And one other thing I wanted to mention is that we've been talking primarily about LinkedIn, but some questions came in about using these techniques on other social platforms, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So where it's appropriate, if you want to throw in comparisons to those, I think that would be great.
Yeah, I talk about LinkedIn first because it really should be the strategic network. We have the ability to map out organizations to see where people work. When you engage with someone on Instagram, and this is assuming we're talking B2B sales, where we're trying to sell from our organization to another organization, right? We don't know where people work out on Instagram. People on Facebook don't often say where they work. And the same goes with Twitter. So from that aspect, LinkedIn makes it very easy to find people in organizations. That being said, if you're connected with a customer or a prospect and you know their Instagram profile, you know their Facebook profile, you know their Twitter profile, the same concept in terms of engagement carries over to all social networks. But the publishing of content concept is a little bit different, because if you're publishing professional content on LinkedIn, is that appropriate to publish on Instagram or even on Facebook? And this is where the content piece will often determine what networks you spend a lot of time on. But in terms of building personal relationships, I mean, absolutely. If you can connect with someone on Facebook or Instagram or whatever network they spend most of their time on. If it's not LinkedIn, that's only going to come to your benefit. But for all the reasons I'm going to show you, and I've already started to, LinkedIn does become the strategic center. I'd say first master LinkedIn, and after you've mastered LinkedIn, train your salespeople on the other networks that they can use where appropriate. But there's still a lot of salespeople that do not want to use their personal Facebook for business use, or use their personal Instagram for business use, but they don't mind using LinkedIn because it was a professional network to begin with, or maybe they don't mind using Twitter for the same reason. So when we talk social selling, LinkedIn is just the most appropriate network to begin with and to have strategic focus on for many reasons.
Okay, great. We have several questions that we can get to at the end, and I think one question that will be probably addressed in this section is if this is applicable to job search, and probably profile development would talk a little bit about that.
Yes, everything is a sale. Whether you are selling products and services from a company, or you're selling yourself, it's the same concepts. Everything is equally applicable. The sales navigator piece and some of the other things that require a large organization are a little bit different, but definitely if I am in job search, then my buyers are obviously hiring managers that I would want to connect with, engage with, and I'd also want to publish content and have a robust personal brand. So it's absolutely applicable. So you already hinted, Margaret, from that question of LinkedIn versus other networks. And just the fact of the matter is that everything we do professionally, LinkedIn is our professional home, which means not only can we do more from a sales perspective on LinkedIn, but our employees will not put up as much pushback on implementing what I'm talking about versus another network like Facebook, where they might be a little bit more personal on. And what's really interesting is that as much as a company, if from a company perspective, we want to sell more on LinkedIn, we're sort of limited to our LinkedIn company page. And similar to, I talked about early on that social media is really becoming pay to play, it's going to cost a lot of money to get visibility for our content in the news feeds of our prospects. That's why employee participation to be successful on LinkedIn is the gateway, because in order to be seen in the feeds, we need to publish as a person, and this is the network updates. If we think about LinkedIn groups, we need to engage as people. Companies cannot have their own LinkedIn group. It has to be from a person. Only people can begin LinkedIn groups. And long form publishing, which is like blog post content, which can only be done by people, not by companies. So savvy companies are realizing early on that if they want to be seen on LinkedIn, it really needs to come from people, from the faces of their organization. And as a publishing platform, and for those marketers that might be on this webinar, it becomes pretty compelling that, these are examples from my own post. This is a blog post that I published that had 200,000 views. And because this is LinkedIn, the people that are coming are from large enterprises. We have IBM, Microsoft, Oracle. We do have, salespeople being number one, marketing specialists being number two, but CEO, executive director were the third most types of people that viewed this content. My biggest audience was London, and then New York, and then San Francisco. And I am located in Orange County, California. And as you see, most of my views did not come from my own connections, but from second-degree connections. And this is the most powerful thing about publishing on LinkedIn. And even if you don't publish blog post, when I was putting together the social selling program for Rutgers Business School, it started by reaching out to instructors, and I started to vet who the great social selling instructors might be with this very simple status update on LinkedIn that got 22,000 views, that got several reshares. And once again, the viewers, SAS, Microsoft, LinkedIn, IBM, CEOs number two, and they come from outside of Orange County, California, and it's second-degree network. So LinkedIn, whether we're publishing blog content or status updates, the visibility for content might just be the best out of any social network out there in terms of gaining visibility outside of your own network. And it works this way because so long as someone in your network likes or comments or engages with your content, you'll often see in the newsfeed that so-and-so in your network engaged with this content. And that's how LinkedIn is slowly becoming one of the most viral social networks or social media that exist. So I also talked before about the social selling index. This is something that LinkedIn provides, and I hope that this link still works. It should, but this is accessible by anybody. It's not available on their, from your LinkedIn profile. But if you were to go to this link, linkedin.com, /sales/SSI, you'll begin to get a number. And some organizations actually use this number as a way to compare their salespeople, or to say, hey, you're currently at 10%, we want you to increase by at least 1% a month. And it will give you a ranking in terms of people in your industry as well as people in your network across 4 different areas. And the 4 elements of the social selling index, obviously personal branding is going to be the first one. Number 2, finding the right people. This is, doing searches and what have you. Number 3, engaging with insights. This is obviously through the publishing of content and engaging with other content, and then building relationships. This is through the art of connecting. So not all of these apply to the LinkedIn profile, but they sort of verify a lot of the things that I am also talking about here. If your salespeople are following this, naturally that social selling index number should go up. I don't know if I'm going to penalize people whether they're 84 or 85. I'd want them to get into the 80s, or at least be in the top 10 or top 5, or ideally top 1%. So, the difference between an 84 and an 85 might not be great, but the difference between an 80 and a 20 is great, and it's going to show that your salespeople are doing more of the things they should be doing. I actually have my own proprietary way of reviewing LinkedIn profiles. This is a service that I offer my clients in terms of just looking at your LinkedIn profile. What are the important components and how I would weigh them, and giving participants a score and allowing them to compare with each other. I think that credibility is very important, and this is manifested in recommendations, obviously, but through other areas: the publishing the content, the networking, the contactability in a LinkedIn profile, the text branding, and the visual branding that a lot of people forget about. But we are visual animals, and LinkedIn does give us the ability to visually represent ourselves. So this is there's a lot of things I think that go into a LinkedIn profile, but hopefully this gives you sort of a snapshot of what is important. So we've talked about 2 of these components. I want to make sure that we have enough time to talk through all of the components. The third tool of the trade, really the greatest social selling tool, is LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Sometimes they change the name of the product, but it's basically the LinkedIn product for the sales team. And for those of you that haven't, and I should have had a poll question, how many of you have ever used LinkedIn Sales Navigator? Because compared to your advanced people search, you get access to a lot of information that is not available in the standard LinkedIn search. There's additional filters. The user interface is a lot easier to use. You have the ability to filter between people and companies very easily. If you're building out a prospect list of companies and then you want to go in and look for leads at those companies, LinkedIn, this product makes it very, very easy for you to do that. You can save profiles and make lists of prospects. You can tag prospects and they never know that they've been tagged. You can see, people that have changed jobs in past 90 days. Maybe this is a trigger event in which you can reach out to them, people that have been mentioned in the news, people that are active. Not everybody is active, so this is a great way of finding out, hey, are they even going to reply to my email? Are they actually on LinkedIn? So this at a snapshot is going to make your sales team find more relevant people much, much quicker. This is just a snapshot of this notion of lead results versus account results, and the filters are different. Once again, if you're building up a list of prospective companies, even departmental headcount, we only want to sell to companies that have at least 10 people in R&D. These are the types of searches that you can do with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. That's going to save you a tremendous amount of time. You have default sales preferences. So if you only want to focus, this is a sample of what my company might focus on, because we do a lot of business in Japan and California. But regardless of the industry or the company size, if you know who you're selling to, you know who your target market is, this is going to save you time, because once you have these sales preferences in LinkedIn Sales Navigator, whatever search you're going to do is only going to show you results that have already been vetted by your sales preferences. Another huge time saver. Prospecting for leads, once again, looking at all the different filters that we have here that are, some are available in the free product, but many are not. And then once again, if we want to apply our sales preferences or not apply them, we can toggle in and out. It becomes very, very powerful. And in fact, we can build, if we're prospecting for new leads, we can build a workflow right inside LinkedIn Sales Navigator. This is just an example that I like to share with my clients. We search for titles based on saved accounts. So we've already done our sales preferences. We find a list of accounts that we save. We think they're prospects. We do a search for titles of prospective buyers at those accounts. that we save or we tag based on who is the decision maker. Then we tag if they are first degree contacts or they're second degree or third degree based on contactability. We begin contacting, starting obviously with the first degree, and then we monitor this progress. And we can do this all within Sales Navigator, which, by the way, can be synchronized with Salesforce as well. So this is just how powerful of a tool it becomes. And within Sales Navigator, we can do a lot of things, including we can engage with prospects, even if they're not connected, even if we're not following them, just by saving them as a lead or tagging them, we can actually look at their updates. And if they're sharing them publicly, we can begin to engage with them. And you can begin to see how this can become a powerful way to engage with prospects that is just going to be very, very difficult if you're using the free tool. So I'd say, for everybody on this call, if you have not invested in it, it would be a strong investment to make. But it's only a tool. It's not going to work unless you have the training and you follow everything else that I've been talking about leading up to this. And this is sometimes a point that some organizations miss out on. It's going to make the use of this tool all the more effective. So let's move on to publishing content for lead generation. This is me in the 90s selling semiconductors, representing a Japanese manufacturer in China. And really what we were doing as a sales force back then, and what I learned early on, in order to get client appointments, I needed to provide them something of value. And the thing of value was always information, right? Information about new products in the pipeline, about ways in which different customers were using our products, ways in which we've saved other companies money, or maybe time to market, or help them improve the quality of their product. All these things that they did not know, they had no way of finding out, obviously, before the internet became as mainstream as it is today. So really, in a digital age, we want our salespeople to be doing the same thing, and we can be doing this on a daily basis. In fact, companies have invested so much into this content aspect. Instead of relying on our salespeople or trade shows, which not as many people go to, we're now, putting all this content and IP online in the form of content marketing. This webinar is a form of content marketing, right? Blogging, I call this lead generation, asset creation, white papers, webinars, what have you. These are being done by marketing departments to help marketing, but this is content that salespeople can also use. So, content marketing is a marketing approach focusing on creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content to attract and retain a clearly defined audience. This is the same content that our salespeople should be sharing with their prospective buyers as well. And the interesting thing is, when we look at B2B marketers in terms of how they are using content marketing, the #1 distribution channel for their content is social media. So we can imagine, it's going to be very, very hard for them from their company page to get a lot of visibility for their content. But if you have a sales team of 5, 10, 500, 1,000, and only a fraction of those start to share that same content to their audience, you can imagine how much more amplification that content gets. And it begins to serve the need not only of marketing, but of sales as well. So, I mentioned blogging. What are large organizations doing in terms of blogging? This is a storage tank manufacturer, but they're talking about things that their target audience might be interested in. And some of the sample blog posts that stood out for me, best practices for insulated storage tanks, how to be a storage tank superhero, a bit of storage tank history and wisdom. So regardless of how niche your industry is, there's a need for content. There's a need for content for lead generation. And once our sales force is equipped with this content and shares it through social media, you can imagine how it's going to add to more web traffic, more quote requests, more lead conversions, and there will be an ROI from this activity. So every time your salespeople are posting corporate content to their personal social media channels, they're helping not only their own social selling, but also the content marketing initiatives of your marketing division. You begin to see this sales and marketing alignment that is now happening naturally. And where it begins to really happen quite effectively is when your company has something called an employee advocacy program. What I talked about before was, salespeople naturally using some content that they find. Employee advocacy program makes it a more formal way of salespeople to get access to content. So I go back to the slide of the different ways in which companies are leveraging digital for marketing. And at the bottom there, we have something called digital relationship marketing. It's leveraging other people, whether they be influencers or fans, or our own employees. And employees is really where we talk about employee advocacy. And really it revolves around people, right? And the great thing about people is that we trust people more than we trust businesses. And every survey that you'll see says that everybody will trust recommendations from people they know rather than the CEOs or the marketing departments of organizations. And, I go back to that social media replaces nothing and complements everything. People still buy from people and organizations they know, like, and trust, but now content gives companies and people the ability to be liked, trusted, and known in social media. And because of this, and there's a number of case studies, trust builds business. The same content was shared by IBM was shared by their employee experts. Every employee expert had a specific landing page. And what they found by doing measurements of all the leads and conversions was that content shared by IBM employee experts converted 7 times greater than that of the brand, because we trust people. This is one of the core components of why when your salespeople get out there, they are going to have a built-in inherent trust that not every organization has. So, social selling can generate ROI, obviously for social selling, but also for these programs. The problem with a lot of these programs is that not everyone participates. Usually only 3% of employees is the data that I've found. But these 3% of employees generate an incredible increase in content amplification. And if you think about it, the ideal candidate for employee advocacy are the sales team. They can provide the ROI for this program. And the benefit for sales, well, social selling requires content. And this program is going to give them access to a lot of great content that they can easily share on a regular basis. So you begin to see how social selling is helping to break down the walls between sales and marketing. Because before social selling, sales and marketing were part of a siloed organization. The old relationship was marketing generates leads and sales closes leads, right? The new digital reality is that, as I mentioned before, customers today research purchases in the early stages of the buying cycle without contacting salespeople. So content marketing is taking on the education role once held by sales professionals. This is what the marketing team is beginning to be more like salespeople. And salespeople, by publishing content, are beginning to be more like marketers. So marketing now is creating content for every stage of the buyer's journey. And once every salesperson understands the content that exists and where in the buyer's journey it might fit, they can then provide it in a very timely way and a very relevant way to go hand in hand with marketing to help your prospects make the best buying decision. So the new sales and marketing relationship, regardless of what we talk about here, account-based marketing or social selling or employee advocacy or sales enablement, all revolves around content. So now we're moving from a lead focus to a content and customer focused organization. How to create more and better content to help the customer at every stage of the buyer's journey. And hopefully this is what your marketing department is doing right now. So, with social selling, sales now becomes an active participant. They're giving feedback to marketing on what content they need. And marketing is looking at the data and saying, hey, sales, you might want to be sharing more of this content. We found it to be more effective. With social selling, sales and marketing is a natural collaboration serving the same customer. So we get to the final section, and I know we're running out of time, but this is the last thing that I think is necessary. And the larger the organization, the more necessary this is, which is the emergence of sales enablement and its role in social selling. So, outside of everything I've been talking about, we know that the sales process has become more complex over time. Information flow has become more complex. The content has become more numerous and complex. And the tools, just starting with LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which is a very complex tool, have become more numerous and complex over time. So this requires an organization to help the sales team to actually leverage all this technology and this complexity. So sales enablement is the process, it's often the name of a department as well, of providing the sales organization with the information, content, and tools that help salespeople sell more effectively. A serious decision survey of larger organizations said that 61% already had a sales enablement function while 12% plan to build one. Perhaps you haven't called it sales enablement, but you have an inside sales team or a person or a center of excellence that is already doing this. But really, there is a need for every organization that is doing social selling to have this sort of organization. And really, I like to call it a social selling center of excellence, because it's going to be the go-to person or people or department for social networking best practices, for personal branding training, to help make sure that salespeople have the content that they need, and as well as teaching them how to use the various tools, and to do this over time continually, and even to measure the ROI of the social selling initiative. Who owns sales enablement is very interesting because it's not always owned by sales. Sales will own it less than 50% of the time. And when you look at it, sales enablement, as is social selling, because social selling requires content and requires cooperation throughout the enterprise. It's an interdepartmental collaborative effort, especially but not limited to the marketing department. Therefore, the more inclusive the effort, the more you include marketing when you start to create your social selling strategy, or you include HR or internal communications, or the entire enterprise, I believe the higher your chance for success. So to summarize everything, and I know that it was very quick, it's a very deep subject matter that I wanted to give you a broad perspective on, but really what we're talking about here is the evolution of communication, of media consumption, of media influence, and the technology will require organizational change to keep up with the times, and more importantly, the digital transformation of your sales and marketing organization. That really, I think, best summarizes everything that I talked about over the last 45 to 50 minutes. Fortunately, Rutgers Business School and myself have worked together to create a world-class program. I believe that Rutgers is actually the first university that has a social selling curriculum. This is a fairly new program called Social Selling in a Digital World Curriculum. So if you're looking for a tool to serve your organization for social selling, regardless of where you are in terms of your implementation of it, this is going to be a great resource. I, as well as 4 other social selling experts, are instructors, and it is world-class education that will provide you incredible ROI over time. So hopefully we have a few minutes left for questions. Margaret, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Oh, great. Thank you. And Neil, wow, what a great job. And I think the summary was great too. You really did give that broad perspective of a very deep topic, and I'm sure we left people wanting for more. So but there are a couple of questions. Some you sort of addressed as they came in, because they came in before as you were about to cover some topics. So I'm just looking for ones that we haven't addressed yet.
Sure.
And one was about, and it was kind of a comparison of a functionality from Facebook, but it asked, does LinkedIn have to be paid/boosted to be seen by others, and does LinkedIn offer something comparable to Boost?
Yes and yes. So a LinkedIn company page is very similar to a Facebook fan page. For those of you that might be more familiar with Facebook rather than LinkedIn, it's very, very hard to get new fans unless you somehow promote it, which often means investing in advertising, to promote it. And in order to get your content seen in a newsfeed, LinkedIn has an algorithm like Facebook. We know the Facebook algorithm. We often call it edge rank, and we know that the number of fans that see our content in their newsfeed on average now is less than 1% on Facebook, and that used to be more than 10% just a few years ago. So LinkedIn is no different. If you want to get your content seen by more people, you will need to boost it. The interesting thing, though, the average organic engagement rate, especially if you're a B2B company, I'm beginning to see that the engagement rates on a LinkedIn company page are even greater than that of Facebook. So Facebook has gone so far down that in the past, I would, the LinkedIn company page engagement was very, very minimal. So it is still very, very small. Your Facebook engagement rate may be 0.1%, but on LinkedIn you might find you get 0.2 or 0.3%. So it's probably not going to be any worse than Facebook, but still, if you want your content to be seen, you will need to boost. LinkedIn does provide it. Is going to be more expensive. You're not going to be able to get the inexpensive boosting options that you have on Facebook. Facebook, for instance, you can bid at whatever minimum cost per click. On LinkedIn, that minimum cost per click is going to be $2. So it's about the quality on LinkedIn, not the quantity. So it's going to be a very, very different paradigm in terms of how you manage your ad spend there.
All right. So same thing, only different.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the same concept, right? And in fact, LinkedIn has been adopting many things from Facebook: the ability to post videos, and now the ability to live stream, the ability to have these reactions that LinkedIn recently added. So all the social networks are all they're competing with each other, they're competing for mind share, and they're all becoming, more and more similar over time.
Yes. So one question again, because we seem to be on that, are we B2B, are we B2C? What do you consider the top platforms for B2C?
Well, B2C social selling. So I do social selling trainings for B2C as well. And these are people or organizations that are trying to sell to people. Often these people are high wealth individuals. So for instance, insurance or maybe real estate. So from a B2C perspective, obviously, where is the number one network in which people are active? Well, it's Facebook. But Facebook has become more and more an old person's network, believe it or not. So if your demographic is under 35, that number one network just might be Instagram. So I think with B2C, the two most active platforms we're going to see are Facebook and Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
But it becomes a little bit more harder from a professional perspective because people are using these personally. And our salespeople, may want to use these personally as well, which is why, even B2C, the focus of my trainings really is on LinkedIn. But for those that salespeople that are already active on an Instagram or on a Facebook and are okay in using that for sales, they obviously become very, very powerful tools as well. So it's very, very hard to say what is number one because your salespeople may not want to use it, and therefore it's going to be irrelevant. So, but LinkedIn is always going to have a role of being able to pinpoint and find people who live in certain cities who have certain titles, and therefore they, based on their professional experience, if they might be aligned with a target persona. With Facebook and Instagram, though, the opportunities obviously are there. It's going to be a very, very different use. And often the personal brand is going to be aligned with the product or service that your company is promoting. So if you're a realtor or you're an insurance agent, it's going to be more revolving around those sorts of topics, obviously.
Oh, great. Well, there are some more questions, but we have kind of hit and exceeded our time a little bit. So if you don't mind, Neil, what I'll do is I'll share the questions with you, and perhaps we can compose some sort of follow-up blog or something like that to address the remaining questions.
That would be great.
Oh, fantastic. And they're all over the map, and I mean that literally and figuratively. We had questions about comparing this to, Africa and Europe and different things like that. So I think it'll be really exciting for you to address those. But I'm just going to make my closing remarks, which start with thanking you so much and thanking our attendees as well. It was a great discussion because of their lively input, and we really appreciate that. And a friendly reminder that our virtual Lunch and Learn series is a monthly occurrence at which you can meet us in the middle, meaning that the webinars take place in the middle of the month, the middle of the week, and the middle of the day. For more information, you can always visit our website, business.rutgers.edu/alumni/lifelong-learning. We have a very exciting schedule of topics and speakers in the coming months, but we're always open to your suggestions as well. Please stay tuned as today's webinar closes, as you'll immediately see a very brief 3-question survey about this webinar that includes a free-form field that you can type in suggestions for those future topics. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, a link to the archived recording of this presentation will be sent to you very soon, and it can also be found on the Business Insights section of our website. So thanks everyone, enjoy the rest of your day, and bye-bye for now.